So good afternoon. Thank you for being back to the meeting, and thank you for this morning's session, which was promising, fruitful, insightful, and very much what we need. So I think that we are now better prepared than we already were for the discussion this afternoon. For this afternoon, the lineup is that we will start by having a report back from the meetings with the SAC, the Stakeholder Advisory Council, and with the JSSS. And for that, Ken, Sylvia, and Carla will report back. And then we will dive into the proposed adjustment to the IESBA strategy. And at the end, we will have a session from the communications, which has all to do with all this discussion. For those, Vanya, Tomoyo, Sungnam, I haven't forgotten about you, but I think it's more appropriate to give you the floor once we start the discussion around the strategy. Is that okay for you? Okay, so very well. So in that case, I'm going to give the floor to Ken, please.
Well, this is really a continuation of the session we started this morning with the presentation from Apostolos Tomadakis. And now we're moving into the debrief of the SAC, the Stakeholder Advisory Council meeting, as well as the jurisdictional standard setters session that we had both meetings last month, early May. So perhaps without further ado, I'll turn it over to Carla to take us first through the debrief of the SAC discussion. Carla?
Okay, thank you, Ken. Before we dive into the SAC reflections, I'm going to take a moment to set the scene with a few observations from a session with Dr. Tomadakis this morning. He reminded us that in our current landscape where deregulation, simplification, competitiveness are dominant policy narratives, the real risk is that we lose sight of public interest. So that framing offers valuable context for the SAC May meeting, where we held 4 strategic sessions covering several dimensions of our board and also the IESBA. And I'll walk you through some of the key themes that emerged from that discussion. Starting with technology, SAC members spoke extensively about the implication of generative AI and digital transformation. They acknowledged the opportunities such as improved efficiency, risk identification, automation of routine processes. But they also flagged that concerns around automation bias, over-reliance on AI outputs, and risk of professionals losing the ability to exercise independent judgment. As one member said, we're at risk of cultivating a generation of professionals who no longer develop their own judgment because machines are doing it for them. Turning to sustainability, SAC members acknowledge that accessibility assurance is still in the formative stages. They raised concerns about greenwashing and the inconsistency of application across jurisdiction and the implementation gap. Their recommendation was for the board to support clear interpretation and practical tools to drive consistent uptake. On deregulation and simplification, SAC members see this trend playing out now in several jurisdictions. While it is often described as a way to reduce administrative burden and promote competitiveness, they express a thought that without clarity of purpose or proper impact assessment, such move could erode the credibility of assurance frameworks and also investor protection. So the SAC call on both boards to stay grounded in principle-based, scalable standards that uphold across jurisdiction and even political cycles. Finally, on fragmentation risk, SAC members emphasize the importance of boards' role in preserving global consistency. They see IESBA and IESBA as international anchors, especially at the time when regulation paths are diverging across jurisdiction. Their message was to reinforce that leadership through adaptable, coherent standards that are seen as credible across borders. Next slide, please. So in light of these themes, SAC members shared some practical ways the board could respond to reinforce our relevance and to build trust in our standards. First, they encourage us to stay focused on investor needs. That means refining our value proposition, not just describing what the standards are, but also explain what they achieve in practice. Second, SAC members flagged that we need to engage with investors more directly. Real-life case studies, practical illustrations, these help bring the standards to life, especially for those that are not steeped in technical guidance or words. Third, they urge for us to broaden our communication strategy. Not everyone engages with us through exposure drafts. SAC members suggested perhaps shorter formats such as briefs or videos as a way perhaps to reach a wider group of stakeholders. Finally, they emphasized the importance of ongoing dialogue. Keeping channels open and active is essential to maintaining relevance and stakeholder buy-in as the ecosystem continues to evolve. Throughout the line, all this was clear. In terms of regulatory churn, our ability to clearly articulate the public interest, particularly on transparency, trust, and ethical behavior, is more critical than ever. So I'll bring you to the next slide, which is reflective of two areas where SAC members believe our boards could sharpen our focus. First, they encourage a measured response to regulatory shift. Deregulation, as they noted, often follow political cycles. So the advice was not to rush to react, but don't be passive either. Instead of launching into new standards, SAC members suggested we could look at ways to support jurisdiction in applying what already exists. That might mean producing guidance and practical tools and scalable implementation support. Second, SAC members call for more compelling value proposition, one that communicates the real world outcomes of our standards that deliver, that is to enhance trust, better investor protection, and greater transparency. To back that up, they did recommend investing in stronger evidence base, such as post-implementation reviews, root cause analysis, insights for inspection findings. These are just not tools for refinement as shared. They are critical for enforcing accountability and impact as global standard setters. And that concludes my report back on the SAC discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Carla. So we turn now to the joint session at the jurisdictional standard setters. Sylvia, over to you.
Early May, we had our usual meeting with the jurisdictional standard setters, both IEESB and IESBA. And of course, on the agenda, we had the discussion of different projects as well that we will hear about during this week. But what's relevant to our session was the joint session, so the joint IEESB and IESBA JSS meeting. And the meeting was attended by more than 17 JSS, I believe, and it was a bit different than the SAC meeting because the topic on the deregulation and the impact on the adoption and the implementation was focusing mainly on the sustainability area. And the objective was to hear the trends regarding the regulation and deregulation on the sustainability theme, but also to hear the views on how these trends would impact the adoption and the implementation in the specific jurisdiction. So what was reported by the JSS representative that there is different trends, so diverging trends, because there are still some jurisdictions that are moving forward with their plans of sustainability reporting and assurance. However, there are equal numbers who are moving towards deregulation or simply waiting out to see the reactions of other countries as well. But what was the common theme that we heard, that there is still a growing need for sustainability information. So there is a growing number of sustainability reports and sustainability assurance, even if it's not on a mandatory basis, but on the voluntary basis. And for that reason as well, despite of the deregulation, the JSS representatives agreed that one set of global standards is really valuable, and they recognize the value of global standards because these global standards are really valuable to reduce the cost of the cross-border engagement and audits. And some of them also mentioned that global standards could even have a better impact towards simplification than the deregulation trend. Regarding the impact of these trends on the adoption and the implementation and what should be the next steps for the IFIA boards, what they noted, I think it's in common with the SEC, that they believe that it's time for reflection now for both boards, given the current developments and the volume of the new standards. And they suggested that the boards rather focus on the adoption and the implementation. They also noted, however, that these trends regarding the regulation is cyclical in nature. So they cautioned against like reacting, and before reacting, just really have time for reflection and see if there is a need for simplification, and if there is, how it should be best achieved. We heard really good suggestions regarding how we can focus on the adoption and the implementation. For example, regular engagement, mainly with early adopters, because these are the countries where we can hear the best practices and they can be examples for others. How we can utilize the technology for better accessibility, what we have already discussed, for example, like different volumes, or not focusing on PDF, but other ways of publishing our standards as well. And also not just focusing on implementation issues, but maybe presenting best practices as well in sustainability assurance. We also discussed regarding going forward, what they emphasized, that there is a need to consider the balance of any new standards, the balance of the costs and benefits. So they suggested that the boards use a cost benefits analysis, or have a better institutional reflection before starting a new project, and have a good rationale before starting a new project. So this was mainly the brief summary of the joint session that we had with the JSS last month.
Okay, thank you very much, Sylvia. So after that, I think if you can just flip to the next slide. I don't know who's holding the clicker. Is that you, Jeff? So I'll pass it over to you.
Thanks, Ken. I just before I do that, I just want to see if Gabriella want to quickly pause it to see if there's any questions.
Thank you very much, Jeff. I think that before we move, I just would like to know if anyone has any question about this report back, and I think that wasn't clear, or any. Christelle.
Yeah, if we can come back on the previous slide, I wonder if during the discussion, when the GSS advised us to be clearer on cost-benefit analysis, they have good practice examples on their jurisdictional level to bring to us.
The discussion didn't go to these kind of depths to receive some examples, but I think it's a really good comment that maybe we should ask them next time if they have any proposals on that. But no, we haven't heard like suggestions.
But it's a very good question, and something probably to follow up upon. Chana, I suppose that you want to say something, if I can read your face.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the issue, Crystal, came up. But you know, in our jurisdiction, even we don't do a cost benefit analysis. So you know, I've not seen a cost benefit analysis of a standard. So I don't know whether some of the other standard setters have seen a cost benefit analysis. You have seen, Mark?
We have to do impact analysis for standards that will have a cost over a certain amount. There is a sort of there is a process that we follow, and you're considering both quantitative and qualitative impacts.
Okay, thank you, Mark. David, please.
One of the ones you might want to look at is the IFRS Foundation. They do some sort of cost benefit analysis when they issue their standards as well. So they might have a model that, I don't think it's at a granular level, but they might have one that at a high enough level, at least it gives you some directional sense that would support, because they're asked that same question.
Yeah, thank you, Javid. Anyway, I don't know if there is any other question. This is another topic on which we have been receiving significant comments and suggestions. Of course, we will not put it aside. We will analyze, see, benchmark against other standard setters and etc. Being clear that and obvious that some standard setters are not comparable. We are not comparable with IFRS Foundation. We are 10% of or less than 10% of the people and of the capacity and etc. But also more important than that, and not to be stuck on the operational obstacles, we have to have in mind that international, global cost-benefit analysis is a huge exercise. So sometimes we should be careful with what we wish for, because this, depending on what we need to put in place, it can be extremely requiring, let's put it like that, financially, in terms of resources and etc. It's very difficult to do a global cost effects analysis. I have the experience in Europe, and it's just Europe. And well, there is something, but if you see the substance of what's in place, it's anyway. Thank you for the comment, for the question, Christelle, which was very appropriate. Vanya, please.
Thank you, Gabriela. Actually, I don't think they do, David. What we find in the IFRS Foundation's standard is the clause that the company you do a cost-benefit analysis, just in case they realize that the benefits are lower than the cost, then they are allowed not to apply that specific standard. I do not know any kind of company that had used this article in the standards, but they delegate the cost-benefit analysis to each companies. That's one of the purpose of being principle-based, but yes.
You're right.
Written, yes.
You're right. Companies do that, but you're also right that I've never seen a company either, particularly when it's material.
In any case, thank you very much for these very quick comments, very opportune about the topic. So as you know, this is also there is also, I think, a PIOB interest that we do something in that respect. So inevitably, we will have to do something in that respect, but hopefully something which is, on the one hand, calibrated to our dimension, impact, and etc., appropriate and meaningful, because the worst thing is that we come up with something to put in a document or so, and which at the end does not mean anything, which usually dilutes the relevance and the credibility of the organizations. Anyway, you will see this coming back to this table probably over the next times in terms of what we are going to do with our due process and things like that. Making clear that it does not only depend on us, it's not, it's being required by others, or at least that we look at it. So with this now, yes, I'm gonna, sorry, Christelle, I thought you, sorry.
Yeah, just is there a way to interpret a little bit this suggestion as maybe, if needed, being more clear when we enter into a new project, the basis of our analysis, initial analysis, to be on the clarity of the objectives, the foreseen difficulties that we want to address during the project, etc. Something more. Yeah, because cost benefit, we fall immediately into money things, and I would argue that this is not the most important, and at least at the initial stage of a project, it seems quite a dream. But being clear, and I felt we had clear statements when we. For getting into a project, but maybe we could have a look and see if some information were missing to be in this state of mind of being clear of objectives, positives, outputs we expect, and difficulties we want to address.
I fully agree with you, Christelle. And again, seeing things from the positive and constructive perspective, I think that this may help us doing a little bit better job in terms of, as you say, when we initiate a process, being clearer about the objectives that we want to achieve, the benefits, and see if what we are proposing is proportional and effective in terms of achieving the results. So probably we can do better, and that will help us because it makes us more puts us more deliberately look into this question, and that can be a good development for the board. So, and now with this, finally, Jeff, third attempt, but I'm going to give you the floor to present on the recommendations or proposals or whatever we want to call it.
Thank you, Gabriella, and hi, everyone. So the next few moments, we're going to get your feedback on two things. The way we're going to do this is in terms of the proposed way forward and get your feedback. First, we're going to talk to you about some potential realignment or readjustments to our overall strategy as a board. Then we'll get your feedback, and then after that, we will look more specifically at what it means to our work plan for the next 2 years. As you would appreciate, as you would know, towards the end of last year, we had a mid-cycle strategy reviewed, and we looked at a couple of things and made some minor changes. So we're going to have that opportunity a bit later to look at more specifically what it means to our work plan. But first, we want to get your thoughts in terms of the planning committee's recommendations in terms of the proposed overall IESBA strategy. So, of course, what the board has heard so far, we've heard feedback from the SAC meeting and the JSS Jurisdictional Standard Setter meeting. You had also received information about from the comments from the IFAC summit as well as the GAA letter. And the planning committee had a couple of opportunities to develop their thinking in terms of looking at what this means to this board in terms of going forward, certainly for the next 2 years or so. So what the board has heard is on the left-hand side, if we have heard a few comments about the trends in terms of what are the trends that are impacting the external reporting environment. Particularly, we have had a lot of discussions, like Carla mentioned, at the SAC meeting just a month or so ago. This SAC meeting the discussions is not just for this board. It was also for IESB as well. So the comments from the SAC are applicable to both boards and to IFEA as a whole, and to the two standard setting boards. And of course, we've heard a lot about the trend, certainly in some jurisdictions when it comes to deregulation and simplification. And you've heard some of the comments is not just about making changes and stopping everything. It's about taking time to reflect and what it means. But we've also heard some fairly consistent stakeholder feedback on a number of aspects. The first one is that stakeholders need more time to assimilate the recent standards and to make sure they can properly adopt and implement these standards. Of course, when you think about just over the last few years, we have finalized quite a lot of major standards. We, of course, at the end of last year, we had sustainability. And then earlier, a few years ago, some of you will remember, we had non-assurance services, fees, and the public interest entity definition. And then more recently, of course, the ETGA technology, as well as tax planning. And these are all fairly major projects. So there's certainly we understand where the comments from our stakeholders that there's a lot for them to consider. And as we've heard a little earlier today, it's not just this board. Other international standard setting boards that they also need to consider and work on those changes as well. Another consistent feedback that we heard from our stakeholders is that they really see there's a priority for this board to really focus on developing supporting materials and not so much and perhaps use a resource on that rather than on developing a new standards. For instance, if you look at technology, it became effective late last year. There may be it may be a chance for the board to reflect on whether we need to do more work in terms of looking at adoption and implementation and developing more support materials to help our stakeholders to understand the impact of some of these standards and help them to more easily adopt and implement some of these standards that we have finalized over the last couple of years. The third point is another certainly consistent feedback that we've heard is that we should really there's a need for us to promote the value of our standards, both I think collectively as the code as a whole, but also of course independent individual standards that we have approved and other key revisions that we have made, and that would really help to enhance adoption of the code and of the other standards. We've heard in some jurisdictions or some regions rather the uptake of the code might have dropped a little bit, and we have also heard from stakeholders the importance of prioritizing a post-implementation review to help this board understand the impact of some of these standards that we have finalized over the last few years. And we've also heard that the importance of stakeholders engagement. And then, of course, we need to balance all this in terms of, as we always do, in terms of looking at the resources that we have, both at a staff level and also at a board level, and also looking at, as we go through the final stages of a transition to the new staff-driven model as well. So with that in mind, the planning committee has spent some time to look at what this means. Now, of course, the planning committee is taking a more proactive approach at this because the planning committee essentially is the working group for the strategy and work plan. So that means that they need to more proactively look at what it means certainly in terms of the work plan going forward. So the planning committee has come up with the recommendations. Essentially, you can break that up into four main pieces. The first one is about strategic reinforcement of support for adoption and implementation. Now, we have already, of course, identified this is an important aspect for the board to focus on, and hence we have started an adoption and implementation working group, and at the moment, largely focusing on sustainability and use of external experts. But there's certainly, as I mentioned earlier, there are other standards that we have finalized that perhaps this board should consider spending more time and more resources in terms of reinforcing the support on adoption and implementation. The second focus, as we have heard from our stakeholders, and I think this board also agree, is that it's on the focus on post-implementation reviews. And we do have a few coming up. Just on this current work plan, for this year, we're due to start the NOCLA post-implementation review, and then next year on restructure code, and then followed by long association, NAS or non-assurance services fees, and then PI. So there's certainly, we see that the planning committee see that there is a need for us to really put a focus on post-implementation reviews that are coming up. Just for the board's information, also when we think about post-implementation reviews and our sister board IESB is also starting on some as well, and we need to work with them to make sure that we have a consistent way to conduct our post-implementation reviews. So we'll be doing some coordination work with them on that front. We've heard a little earlier about looking at maybe some iterative approach and not just a point in time. So these are all things that we would have to take into consideration when we look at post-implementation reviews. As we have finalized a few major standards over the last few years, so these post-implementation reviews that are coming up are also quite significant from this board's perspective in understanding the impact that these standards have, in understanding the adoption, of these standards. The next point is about enhancement of stakeholder engagement and communications. Particularly, we have heard a lot about the importance of enhancing our engagement with different stakeholders. We've heard that perhaps there was some misunderstanding, even in terms of the impact on the scope of our sustainability standards, and perhaps any other expectation gaps between what this code and what our standards are supposed to achieve, or what some stakeholders think they achieve, or perhaps misunderstanding of the remit of this board, or certain things that require perhaps more clarification. But all that, it's also about communicating our value proposition better. As we have heard from the SAC, just a couple of months ago, the SAC actually spent quite a bit of time, as Gabriela has mentioned, talking about the value proposition, not just about this board, but also this board and together with IESB as the standard setting boards of IFEA. They recognize that it is really important for our stakeholders to have a clear understanding of what these standards are supposed to achieve at a global level, and what it means to capital markets, why it would be better to our stakeholders. Not just for the firms, we have heard actually a lot about, we need to make this clearer to our investor groups, because yes, they do have high influence, but sometimes the interest level, as we've heard earlier, is relatively lower. So there is a point that we need to have better communication of what our value of what our standards value propositions is, and how it adds value to our stakeholders. And as we've heard also, it's very much about building relationships. Not that we have poor relationships with our stakeholders, but they can be better. And I think this is a good opportunity for the board to stop and reflect, and perhaps look at how we can direct some of our resources to building even better relationships with some of our key stakeholders, with the professions, with the regulators, investors, and others. So that means, just on the last point there, that means that we are looking at slowing down our standard issuance. We're not looking at issuing any more new standards before the end of 2026. Just to clarify, it doesn't mean that we don't do any standard setting work. In fact, a post-implementation review is all part of standard setting. Adoption and implementation work, this is all part of about standard setting, relating to standard setting. It just means that we're not necessarily issuing any new standards, but there'll still be work directly on perhaps looking at new standards, but work with stakeholders, identifying what the problems might be, the issues. But we are looking at slowing down the issuance of standards, and hopefully that will give as we've heard from our stakeholders, they need more time to assimilate the recent standards. And before I pass it back to Gabriella to moderate the discussions and see if Gabriella and Ken or James have any additional thoughts and comments, there's a couple other thoughts that perhaps we might ask the board to consider as well is, as we've heard earlier, whether we need to think about the direction of any future profession agnostic standards. And also the possibility of no low-hanging fruits that would be effective also in addressing matters such as perceptions or misunderstanding of our standards, or perhaps addressing some things about the perception or complexity of our code, and hopefully that would help to simplify things in the sense it would help people to perhaps get to where they need to get to in the code a bit better and easier. So with that, this part is about the strategic approach, and a little bit later after this discussion, we'll talk to you and get your thoughts on the actual work plan. So with that, I'm going to pass it back to Gabriella. Thank you, Gabriella.
Thank you very much, Jeff, and Sylvia and Carla, to whom I have not thanked for the presentation and for the very good recap of what were the discussions at the JSS and the SAC. So we are now all set for the important discussion about the strategy going forward, about what are we going to do with everything that we have heard, with all the reflections that we have made, and with this certainty and focus about us serving the public interest, which we cannot lose sight despite some pressures, some movements, dynamics, and etc. That's what we need to do. So what's being put forward as a suggestion or proposal for this board to address, comment on, and contribute is the product of a very careful reflection and many discussions. Of course, we heard, and so this includes responses to what we have heard from our stakeholders over the last time. I would not say that it's reactive. It's not a reaction. On the contrary, I think it's really constructive, and it's taking action after having agreed that there are some areas where we need to refine our strategy to make it fully fit for purpose in the context where we are. The discussion this morning in the executive session, I think that prepared us very well for this discussion, so I'm not going to repeat what happened there, but I'd like just to take 2 or 3 things which is important to repeat in an open session, which is these elements that we will need to take on board about some standard setting fatigue, the very fair suggestion and the very appropriate reflection that we made on the need to consolidate the existing standards. And this is not only fair to our stakeholders, it's also fair to ourselves. Because if anything, sometimes if we look back, and again, because I have said that already this morning, in the hectic times of the last 2 years, maybe we need to step a little bit back and honor the good work that we have made in other areas recently, and that may require some attention from us in providing assistance to the stakeholders, awareness, and all these things. So we heard, but we also reflected. We made our own reflection on all this, and this is the product of this reflection. 1 or 2 notes on the proposed overall IESBA strategy, mostly, for instance, on the enhancement of stakeholder engagement. We spoke about that this morning. I don't think that it is possible to go beyond what we are doing in terms of number, intensity, speed, etc., of stakeholder engagement. I think that we have reached the limit of our capacity and reasonable activity in terms of stakeholder engagement. What we may need to change or adjust is the way we engage with stakeholders, and probably be more structured, more focused, more targeted, but also enhance our communications. And this is there because the number of meetings does not speak per se about the quality of the conversations and dialogues. So these ideas of closing the feedback loop, providing more feedback to the feedback, but also being humble enough to recognize that sometimes we can do things in a more clear, explicit, understandable way in many senses. And some of these ideas floated this morning here around is really important. So this is not exactly a shift of direction. I think this is a development of our direction rather than a shift in direction. And that's what we are proposing. We are proposing, suggesting that we may reflect on a possible evolution of our strategy to make it sharper, to make it more effective, to make it more at the service of the public interest. This is not written on the stone, so this is not a conclusion that we made and that we are presenting to the board, is really being put forward for discussion, because whatever comes out of this discussion, and after that we will have an important discussion about so what, because the conclusions that we will take here, if any, will be then applicable to what are we going to do in terms of work. But whatever comes out of this discussion, it has to be the discussion and the approach of this board collectively, and not my approach or whoever, John and Mary approach. So thank you in advance for your contributions. We heard this morning, so there was already a lot. I think that we don't need to repeat many things, but maybe of them, it's good that everyone listens to them publicly. And I have not forgotten that we had 3 remaining comments from the morning, which I will ask Vanya, Tomoyo, and Sunam if it's still relevant, and I hope so, that you start with your comments that unfortunately we could not listen to during the executive session. I don't remember exactly the order, but I think it was Vanya, the first one. Vanya, do you want to speak?
Yeah. What I was to comment this morning, Gabriela, is that this situation is a very good opportunity for us to review our procedures, to review our circumstances, and to balance what is useful and what is not. I not see everything as a critics, but as an opportunity for us to improve. Because if our mandate is to prepare standards that will be used for the public interest, if these standards are perfect and beautiful, but it's not well understood, so it will be worthless. So it is very important that we balance and we listen to the comments, and so we can be positive that we are delivering exactly what the users, the stakeholders are needing. But of course, not everything is something that we should do. Many things, I think it's something that we should communicate better. So we have to give them the opportunity to explain their anxieties, and so we can, at the other way, an opportunity to explain better what we do. And simplification is always welcome. And in this sense, I think that it is much that we can do in order to make the standards understandable, even for those who are not professional accountants, as we are in the great majority.
Thank you very much, Vanya. This is a very good message at the start of this discussion. It's like setting the tone. So thank you for that. And then we had Tomoyo, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just came up as a proposed strategy, the enhancement of stakeholder engagement and communication. I think this is important. I really appreciate that the IESBA's communication is really active, and it got better, especially for the IESA one, and I appreciate the hard work. But still, but maybe how to communicate, especially with the preparers and investors, can be improved. And probably in this current style of communication, advocating is okay, but maybe getting feedback needs some improvement. So even for the ESO one, I think the advocating was good, but gathering feedback, it was most from the PAO regulators and the academia side, and less from the investor side. So yes, but we should get feedback. this is my perspective, but IESBA tends to ask detailed questions and get to more technical feedback, like about independence. But the investors will more want to have more mutual understanding about the standards, and want to provide a balanced proposal. So I think value proposition is very important. Also, when the communication with the investor preparers, I think it's very important to work together with the IWSB or even the ISSB, because currently for this sustainability topic, whether the sustainability disclosure requirement is meeting the investors' expectation, there might be a gap. So when there's a gap about the reporting requirements between the current regulatory requirement or the standard requirement and the investors' expectation, if we discuss about on that gap, discussing about independence or ethics and independence is not much value for the investors. So this reporting and assurance, if these are meeting the investors' expectation, it's the basis of starting discussion about ethical and independence requirements. So that kind of coordination is also important. That is my view. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tomoyo. Sungnam, please.
Thank you. I think there are many common concerns or comments, such as open dialogue, enhancement of stakeholder engagement, perception that regulatory view is prioritized over PA's view. So I think all of these are interrelated, meaning that the more or the deeper engagement, the better, right? So I believe James addressed and expressed the plan early in the morning. And on top of that, I think it would be worthwhile to benchmark the best practices of international institutions, such as what UNCTAD, and also global standard setters. We need to learn how they do better, or anything we can utilize from their experience. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sungnam. So, David, please.
Thank you. So I would say on the proposed strategy, probably no surprise, I strongly support the proposed strategy. So the focus on PIRs, the enhancement of the engagement, including deepening relationships with stakeholders that perhaps we don't always traditionally engage with, I think is important. And then just taking some time to reflect on standard setting. Two suggestions specifically. So on the strategic reinforcement for adoption and implementation, yes, that's absolutely important. The question I would ask is, given the renewed focus, let's say, or the reflection that we're doing, are we going to limit it then to sustainability, or are we going to think about then perhaps technology and others? And it might be helpful if we go beyond sustainability, which we're actively working on with A&E, as we know, to be more clear about that, to help, I think, some of our ecosystem understand what our focus is on A&I. And then the second suggestion I have for you is on the fourth point. It's slightly modify the language, so slow down on standard issuance. I would say, rather than saying no new standards, I would say narrow scope amendments will only be considered, or only narrow scope amendments. So we use the language that we've heard from some of the feedback so they can hear that we're responding. It's the same thing, but it's just using their language. Thank you.
Thank you, David, for that suggestion. We will consider. And Amajit, I think that Amajit is the best the best position one to respond to your question about what's next in adoption and implementation. Amarjit, please.
Thanks, Gabriela. So I also support the proposed overall strategy. I just have some thoughts around each of the pieces here. First is just to sort of emphasize, I mean, let's go back to basics in some sense. So what is our mission? What is IESBA's mission? Our mission is to serve the public interest by setting ethics standard, right? So I believe IESBA's effectiveness and impact will be truly reflected in implementation of the standards that we set. So I think I just want to reassure, that's my view, all of us, that it's a very, very important piece, and I think it's good to bring more focus on A&I. So that is point number one. Point number two is on enhancement of stakeholder engagement and communications. I mean, I fully support that, but I would just like us to think, can we also maybe detail is not the right word. What is the outcome that we are expecting out of this exercise? Aimed at what outcomes? There could be some detailing around that so that we are clear. You know, we've been engaging, we've got some feedback. For example, now out of the next round of engagements, what is our objective? We're trying to understand the concerns better and then work on those concerns. Let's articulate that more for the sake of clarity. Fourth point on slowing down, I have a similar comment as David just mentioned. I think we need to be careful here about the optics. See, we are known as a standard setting body, and the macroeconomic environment is changing very fast. Every day you have new challenges, a lot of uncertainty. So how do we communicate this piece? While I support the slowdown, but how do you communicate? It has to be a little strategic. We should keep some window open in case there is a crisis. We'll be ready to step in quickly. In case the crisis requires some guidance on the ethical side. So just one or two comments more and then I'll stop. Also, this proposed overall strategy, is it time specific? In the sense, are we looking at this is a strategy for next 2 years? Or do we need to say that? I think we should just think about that as well. And just one last point. This is not a component of the strategy, but more in terms of when we are engaging with stakeholders. This whole talk about deregulation and simplification. So in terms of the deregulation, see, this is a drive, I think, which is sweeping all over the world now. And as regulators, we are facing this. The need for simplifying, need for improving ease of doing business and so on. But the regulatory question the way to position this debate when we engage with the stakeholders is that, fine, we can deregulate, but what is the risk appetite of the stakeholders? What is your threshold? So I think we need to communicate that as well, that deregulation should be seen in the context of risk that will increase in the system. So it is an inverse relationship. More you deregulate, perhaps you will add more risk to the system. That is just input for engaging with stakeholders in these debates. I'll pause with that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Amarjit. Mark, please.
Thank you. So I think the proposal around strategic reinforcement of A&I is very sensible. And for what it's worth, I think it should cover the full range of significant changes to standards that the board has made. I think that's good. Also, I think there's clear stakeholder demand out there for a stronger focus on PIRs, but I do think that potentially is linked to that wider question that came out of the Paris event about effects statements. And I think we've done some great work. It might mean that we need to think about having an economist around the table in our skill set if we don't already. Economists, please step forward. The stakeholder engagement and communications, absolutely, and it should be the way through which we identify what fills our future strategy through that stakeholder engagement, because it's not only explaining what we do, it's about finding out what there's demand out there for. And I suppose it's the fourth one that I have a question over, because I don't know whether we sufficiently understand whether the issue is the standards that have been issued or how they're issued. Like, quite often, the issue that stakeholders raise with us is stop issuing things 3 times a year, brigade them together. So do you actually launch all of your change at given points rather than doing things sort of progressively? I also think that sort of narrow scope amendments is a really important piece, because we need to be alive to dealing with emerging issues. So, for instance, I've had a lot of discussions recently about people asking about issues arising from economic uncertainty, challenges in trade, sort of noise in the bond markets. All of those bring with them potential ethical challenges, both for preparers and auditors or assurance providers. So we also need some sort of track that is going to keep identifying what are the emerging ethical challenges, because we need to be able to respond to those. And my final point on the slowdown of the standards issuance is that should not be an excuse for speeding up the issuance of all sorts of other material. So it wouldn't be a good outcome, in my view, if the answer was no standards, but there was lots of other stuff. So we should think about the most efficient way of achieving the outcomes we want to achieve, and sort of determining that accordingly. But I think this is a good window for us to take stock and think about the best way to move forward.
Thank you, Mark. Christelle, please.
Thank you. So I support the proposed overall strategy. I'm just puzzled that the wording here would be used for more communication, and because I think what was said about the fact that ANI would not be focused only on sustainability, the fact that enhancement is maybe not the right term that we would like to put on the objective. And also, I don't see any value in setting the point of no new standards before end of 2026. But I like having, like David said, a mention on the narrow scope amendments that would be raised through the PIRs or through our stakeholders' engagement. Yes, and so I think it would be interesting to have that mentioned more clearly. Thank you.
Thank you, Christelle. Rania, please.
Okay, thank you. So first of all, definitely I support the proposed revisions to the overall strategy or work plan, but perhaps I think, and very much aligned with what was said before, since it is in the spirit of reassessment of how we do things, perhaps it is also time for us to or it's an opportunity for us to reassess how we develop our strategic work plan. I mean, I know that our work plan was developed based on a survey and a consultation paper and feedback from, at the time, what was the CAG. But again, perhaps we should consider how we developed it and moving forward if there are, I mean, if there's a better way or we can improve on that process. Secondly, in terms of strategy, I think that part of our strategy should be, I mean, our messaging and our thinking around what is going on in the current context is that I actually believe that deregulation is an opportunity for us, for principles-based standards, because the reduction of I mean, reduced reliance on prescriptive rules really creates an opportunity for principles-based standards to guide behavior. And I think we should leverage that in our messaging and as we promote the adoption and implementation of our standards in general. On the value proposition, I would recommend to the board to consider moving forward, strengthening its research activities its research activities as part of its standard setting activities, because I think that research really goes a long way towards strengthening our value proposition. I understand and I appreciate how important stakeholder outreach is in terms of developing buy-in, securing buy-in and legitimacy of our standards or our work in general, not just standards, and making sure that our work is valid and relevant and implementable. But I believe that research plays a critical role in grounding our work in evidence and contributing original insights and substance, and into taking the profession beyond existing frameworks and practices and really raising the bar. I think that is extremely important for us to enhance, besides our communication and the way we conduct our outreach. Finally, on the issue of simplification, I think that we can, obviously this is a recurring theme and we should really address it. And I think we can leverage technology towards simplification, using technological tools such as links or hyperlinks. We heard lots of comments about the length of the code. So for example, if we can strip down the code to the main requirements and then just use technological tools or mechanisms in order to add the guidance or the guidance to the code using this technology, we can really demonstrate that really the requirements in the code are not 300 or over 300 or 400 pages, but really much less. And the rest is basically additional material. And so I think that would really, it's an easy and efficient way and a quick win to address the issue of simplification. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rania. Hector, please.
Just briefly, I agree with the proposed strategy. I also agree with the wording suggestions received in terms of how to present this. But I worry if we should not be having a bullet there on simplification. I think we're taking time. We're not issuing new standards. We're doing PIRs. We should also take perhaps this time to start looking at the code with a different view, with the idea of the volumes, with the idea of adding the materials that Rania was suggesting. I think it would make sense to have this bullet, not launching anything if we want before the end of 2026, but taking this time to work on our product.
Thank you very much, Hector. Christelle, do you want to come in again?
Yes, please, just to rebound on what Hector said, because in my mind, it was in finding another word than enhancement. It was including the fact that it's shaping or something like that. we will have more impact if we have more easiness to stepping in the code. So we are speaking about simplification. I don't know if it's maybe simplification in the way to step in, and so it's more a question of shaping the stakeholder engagement and communication, including the way that we help our constituents, stakeholders, etc., to access to the code.
Thank you, Christelle. Tomoyo, please.
Thank you, Chair. About the issuance of new standards, I think we need to consider this with the professional agnostic topics. Forget about that ESA non-PA thing, but like we are trying to expand the influence not only the PAs, but maybe we are aiming to influence the CFOs that are not PAs, or the farm culture and governance topics. It's beyond PAs. And if we want to influence those to that extent, standard might not be the right means, because standards can currently only influence PAs. So, and I think not only the burden to create the standard, but how much influence the standard can make is also the concern of the stakeholders who expected slow down standards. So I think we need to consider whether the what is no new standard, what is the stakeholders' expectation, what do these no new standards mean? I thought it doesn't mean only about narrow scope amendments, but rather the standard is the most effective tools to influence the people that we want to influence, is one reason why stakeholders ask for slowdown. So I think we need to consider about that point as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tomoyo. Paul, please.
Thank you. Maybe just to make sure we're all on the same page, when we say simplification, what we mean is accessibility and usability of the code, or do we actually intend to kind of whittle it down? I think we need to be very clear on the messaging. All we're talking about is accessibility and usability of the content. We're not watering it down. I think that's the first thing we need to be very clear on. Secondly, just very much in support of the strategy orientation, but just getting clarity. When we talk about full agreement on the PIRs, but wanted just to understand, when we say strategic reinforcement of ANI, is it we want to do implementation guidance, we want to do illustrated examples, we want to build real life case studies, or is that what we're being asked for? But how we intend to do the strategic reinforcement is different. Just to make sure we're all on the same page. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Paul. I think I can respond quickly, at least to the first question. I don't think that after the discussions that we had in March and even today, this morning, and I know that you have the same feeling, but it's good that you you make the question so that we can be clear and, as you say, all on the same page. I think that we are not aiming at or looking for dilution of the code or watering down, if that's, I think, your concern. But also I'd like to add, and this is a discussion that we will have probably still today, but I think that the simplification, we are very much focused on the code, and of course it's our main instrument of communication and dialogue with stakeholders, but we can think about other things beyond the code itself, thinking about the language, thinking about how we interact with stakeholders. I think that this simplification is broader than just the code, and this is not, even if it's, I agree, the most obvious start for such a thing. So thank you very much for the questions, which will be, I think, explored the responses in the next part of the meeting or even now. So Ken, Chana, I don't know which of you was first. Oh, sorry, Mark, I didn't see your badge.
That was a really helpful prompt, Paul, because you've now sort of started me off on one of these sort of slightly strange lines of questioning, which is when we talk about the accessibility and usability of the code, you know, we've heard a lot from stakeholders of the code is 300 and something pages long. It's very difficult for me to find what I need to find. So if I'm on the IESBA website and I'm looking at the handbook, if I click on any part of the index, it takes me to that part of the code. So if I want to find the fees provisions that apply in an audit engagement, in 2 clicks I can find the specific paragraphs that I need. If I'm looking at the EIS online, similarly, in 2 clicks I can find any paragraph that I need. So if someone's telling me that this is a 300 and something page document and it's difficult to find what they need to find, obviously they're using a paper copy and someone's torn out the index, or they've not looked at the version online.
Okay, Mark, thank you very much. That's a good point. Although I think that the problem with the accessibility is not only to find what I want, but other things like separating requirements and guidance, like separating PI and non-PI, like, you know, this kind of things. But this is a conversation to be that we need to have about if there is anything that we should do. But thank you for that, because this also responds to a little bit to Sadia, to Rania, in terms of the use of technology to simplify the life of our stakeholders in working with the code. Paul, do you want to still speak? Okay.
I think just also to reiterate that when we talk about the accessibility and usability, it's also making sure that the code is usable by non-PAs, because some level of guidance to where we're seeking to go, and I don't know how we bring that out, because we're trying to do as much profession agnostic guidance. So what's the best way to channel that so that when we talk about accessibility, it is, as it were, for our own and for others, to make sure moving on an even playing field.
Okay, thank you so much. So, Chana.
So I have a couple of quick points. I think with the adoption and implementation, it should be the other projects as well, technology and tax planning. I mean, we have set up something for sustainability, but then I think we need to look at technology and tax planning as well. I mean, at the SAC meeting, you know, the point was made, IESBA is doing so much on technology, and what are you doing? Well, actually, we issued the thing which became effective at the beginning of this year. So, you know, there seems to be less visibility. Then on the last point, I think I don't know, I think it may be better to get rid of that no new standards before end of 2026, because we can just have a general statement, slow down on standard issuance, rather than it looks a bit more definitive when you say no new standards before end of 2026.
Thank you, Chana. Ken, please.
Thank you very much. And I wanted to go back to the discussion around simplification, and I would urge the board to really tread carefully on this topic, because it can mean different things to different people. At one extreme, it can be about dealing with the perception of the size of the handbook, and maybe we can chop it up into different booklets and come up with different parts that would address different constituencies. Maybe it's the accountants in business, maybe it's the auditors, maybe it's the smaller practices, etc. So that can be done. At the other extreme, it is about taking a full review of the code and making revisions to the code and taking taking the code to the chopping block, so to speak. And in fact, we just as a reminder for many of the board members who were not around at the time, but this board precisely undertook that project back in the period of 2013 to 2018. It was a 5-year project. What we call the structure of the code. Then it was meant to precisely make the code more usable, more understandable, easier to navigate, and all the rest of it. And what we ended up with is the green book that you have on your desk, in your hands, in your backpacks. And as part of that, also, I'm minded to remind the board that we also came up with the EIS, the Electronic International Standards. And the reason why we developed the electronic version of the code was precisely to make the code as accessible, make the code simpler to use. And that's why, as Mark almost kind of illustrated as we went through, almost kind of metaphorically, clicking on the contents, table of contents, and getting to the provisions, you need in 2 clicks. Well, you can absolutely do that. That is the electronic version of the code. It is accessible on the website. Do we do enough to promote it? Maybe not. And maybe there's something to be said about communications, and that's a role for our communications team. There's a lot to be said. But my point is, we have to be very careful that we're not equating simplification with making revisions to the code, because anytime we take that approach, it is undertaking a new standard setting project. And that has to go through the entirety of the due process. This is a 2-year project, depending on how, the scope of it, the complexity of what we want to tackle. And importantly, that also will have implications for the firms themselves, because one has to remember that firms have already implemented the extent code. So anytime we make changes to the code, well, guess what? It's going to cause even more problems for them, because now they're looking at more changes coming through, and essentially they're going to be wondering and scratching their heads and kind of figuring out why the ethics board is asking them to change their methodologies and their policies, etc. Just because they're being caused a simplification. So all to say is, I think this needs to be thought through very carefully, and importantly, as we heard during the FX summit, in fact, as the chairs of our 2 boards, very deliberately asked the participants on the issue of complexity to really articulate with evidence the areas of the code where they saw complexity. Because it's easy enough to say, well, it's all complex, etc. But what is complex? So I think stakeholders really need to come forward with some demonstration of what it is that is a perception of complexity. We heard complexity, of course, during the development of the ESA. We know that some parts of the ESA are complex for a reason which we've discussed at the board at length, because an underlying nature of the circumstances and the environment we're dealing with, especially when it comes to group engagements, well, these areas are complex, because you're dealing with new kinds of reporting, you're dealing with engagements that involve many different parties, you're dealing with brand new concepts like value chain, and inevitably there are going to be concerns about complexity because all of these are very new. So I think it's really incumbent on this board to make sure that there is a basis to go forward with making revisions to the code. Paul raises a very important point as well, which is this potential risk of dumbing down, just because certain parts of the code look complex. Well, let's delete requirements to make the code simpler to use. Well, we have to be careful, because if you're deleting requirements, well, maybe you're giving too much of a leeway for accountants and auditors to make judgments, etc. And we know that, in fact, many of the provisions in the code exist for a reason. It is to provide clarity. And that clarity also has been asked from both sides of the aisle, so to speak, both from the regulatory perspective, as well as from the profession. We've heard loud and clear many times from the firms. give us more specificity on the guidance as how to apply certain requirements. So all to say, it's a very complex area, and if there is something to be that can be done to increase usability, accessibility, navigatability, certainly that can be considered.
Thank you, Ken. And well, I think that this is going to be a point for discussion. I'm seeing the time, but we have a lot to do. But we have to come back to this point because no, Hector, I'm not saying that. Please, please go ahead or put it because first it was Nancy. I just ask you, please, to be as focused as possible because we still have the second part of the session, which is on what are we going to do next with this discussion. So, and Nancy, please.
Thank you. Ken, I really appreciate your comments because that was exactly what I was thinking. I've been through projects to restructure a code and they are extensive. I do think there are challenges with any standard to get through and navigate. And I think that is just inherent in the way standards are put together. They are by their nature complicated. Otherwise, we would have fully principles-based approaches. I will say, though, and to the extent that we can make some things available, helping people understand how to navigate through the code may be very powerful. And I think about things, and I think I may even have commented on the last round of FAQs, that it was really helpful to me because I had reached a wrong conclusion on something, and the FAQ helped me get through the right conclusion by following the line of thought. And so I think about things like it's important that you understand how the glossary definitions work because they're critical to getting through the right answer. It's important that you understand the fundamental principles. So just throwing that out there as a suggestion is maybe rather than simplification, we just need to provide people guidance on how to effectively navigate the code. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. I'm going to go first to the ones who haven't spoken yet. Rich, please.
Yeah, certainly I support the approach that's been outlined, but I think Ken said something really important. We've all kind of said bits and pieces of it earlier. And I think it's part of the communication with our stakeholders. We need to go back to them and say, you're telling us this. We need the specifics. Show us the examples where we might do a short-term project or where it's hard to follow, and maybe we do what Nancy just said, create something to help people follow how to get through the code. I think that would all, first of all, was demonstrate we're listening to them and we are interested in what they're saying, but it also helps us reasonably assess whether that's something we should get involved with, if there's a change to be made or not a change to be made. I even think that's a part of when people tell us we should put something on our strategy and work plan. I think we need to spend more time understanding why they think that and what's really the public interest issue. And is it something we can actually do something about from that standpoint? Thanks.
Thank you, Rich. And now to the other one, I'll just ask you to be as to the point as possible. David, please.
Thank you. What I would say to all of us as a board is to keep an open mind. When you've lived and breathed something for many years, it's very easy to get tunnel vision about what it is and how useful it is outside. So I would just encourage us, be open-minded. I agree, we absolutely need to go back to the stakeholders that have provided the feedback to get examples, but we also need to remember that we've got a new part that's been expanded beyond the profession, so they don't have the backdrop that the profession has, and therefore the language needs to be accessible. It's not just about technology, it's about language. Many users don't have English as a first language. So I would just encourage us to not lose sight of that, and I totally understand that we're not talking about dilution, we're not talking about pulling out requirements. That's not at all what we're saying. It's just about making it more useful, easier to understand, but also something that we as a board are willing to challenge ourselves and that we don't fall into the trap of, it's my baby, I need to protect it, is what I would encourage us to think about.
Thank you, David. Amarjit, please.
Yeah, thank you. Just very quickly, 2 points. One is, just to build on what Ken said and Rich also said, uh, can we do some kind of UAT, user acceptance test, just to, get to the bottom of the problem? So that is point number one. Second is on the third piece of the strategy, enhancement of stakeholder engagement and communications. I was just thinking aloud, can we also bring in a word collaboration? We need to collaborate, um, for facilitating common outcomes, common purposes with our stakeholders. And we also need to leverage their resources. So just a thought. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Amajit. Obichukwu, please.
Thank you. I just want to talk about the limited resources in respect to the proposed overall strategy. So my question is, have we considered the limited resources? Because from the strategy has to do with us doing more. So let's also think about the limited resources, if there's need to increase capacity or something. Thank you.
Thank you, Obichukwu. This is a very wise comment. I think that when we put this proposal or these suggestions forward, this was in our mind, and we will see in the next part of the session that to do a few things more, we will have to do other things less. That's what the balance that we are trying to achieve. But thank you for reminding that, because it's truly important. Paul, please.
Thank you. If any, just to really re-emphasize that we are in the business of standard setting. So our measuring stick needs to be whether there's value addition in the way we're tackling the issue we know exists, not making it easier to do this work. It is best way to most effectively tackle the issue we are aware exists, is just us to stay true to our purpose. Thanks.
Thank you, Paul. Nancy, do you still want to speak? David, do you still want to say something? Okay. Okay. Luigi, I'm so sorry, Luigi, please.
No, thank you. And I will be brief. And of course, in agreement with the proposed overall strategy in this slide. And basically, I feel that the advancement and the change of the code that we approved very recently has been very significant. And the proof is the fact that we felt the need to work at implementation guidance, Q&As, and so on. And we are still implementing the entire path of support for the users that we were able to figure out. And even the adoption and implementation is a proof that we felt very significant the change, the volume of changes that we implemented. So I think that it is a very good idea to try to pause a little bit and to go on with this process, or even to reinforce this process, because at the end, we need to facilitate the implementation of all new standards we implemented so far.
Thank you very much, Luigi. So thank you very much for these excellent contributions. We still have a second part of this session, and we have like half an hour for each, which is about what are we going to do with this discussion, and I think some conclusions or pre-conclusions that we can take out of this discussion. But let me just very briefly try to summarize my takeaways. And if I'm wrong, please note it. So we heard something, well, about the importance of being constructive in taking the comments and the suggestions and etc. that we have been receiving and working on it actively and openly, which is the tone that we needed to set for this conversation. We heard about the need to, if I can translate it this way. Tomorrow, they need to segment the groups of stakeholders and have a different kind of communication or approach or engagement with the different stakeholders, because they have different interests. They use the standards in a different way. They have different backgrounds, and so the plain language and approach does not serve the purpose of addressing different groups of stakeholders. We heard recurrently about the need for better communication, better engagement. It's not necessarily the same thing, but they are, of course, connected. And here, I said it already, I think that we can probably not do more in terms of more engagement and whatever enhancement means. And I think it's not that, but I agree with Christelle that probably we should find a better word, not to create the perception that we want to have more meetings and go more places and, and get dizzy instead of sitting and reflecting a little bit. That's not the purpose. The purpose is structure, focus, as James this morning also commented and suggested. So I think that we need to rephrase that, but probably it's what you said. I don't know, you said something, well, evolution or whatever, shaping. So yes, one thing about communications enhancement, and we heard here, for instance, Richard say, now we need to do better communications in the code and etc. I couldn't agree more. Just a heads up or something which is obvious, communications cannot do magic to transform one thing in another thing. So communications, it's an enhancer of the good things, but it cannot fix a problem if there is a problem. And if it does, it's a kind of communications that we probably not want to have, which is to pretend that there is not a problem when the problem is there. So I fully believe, and you all know that, in that communications, it's an incredible, powerful instrument, if well used, at the service of, in this case, the public interest, and that's why we are focusing on it. Let's not wait or expect that communications can do magic things about things that we may need to be doing in a different way. Research beyond practice, yes, Rania, and I'm summarizing a little bit, and it's not that I'm responding to each one of you. Yes, probably I'm not sure that it's research, but I think we need more evidence. That's what stakeholders are asking us. What's the evidence that you are bringing into these projects? Based on which evidence are you working? And there, I think that we need to do a little bit more and better. It's not that we can do ourselves much research, but we should do a little bit. But there are many things available that we might use in a better way to collect more evidence. Simplification. So it's interesting. One thing I must conclude, it was not there, and suddenly it was the topic that we were discussing. So going back to Hector's comment, maybe we should add a bullet. I don't know if we should add a bullet, but the fact is that even not being there as a proposal, we came to discuss it probably more than any other topic. So it's there, and there is a question, there is an issue with simplification. What we are going to do in this respect, I heard you well, strong calls for simplification, some caution being expressed by some of you, namely Ken, but not only, like let's not go crazy and destroy the code and revise the code and etc. First, I will repeat what I said to Paul. I don't think that this simplification is only about the code. It's about the process. It's about the way we engage. It's about the way we treat the topics and etc. There are many areas, but the code or beyond the code, where simplification can be present. I would not narrow the idea of simplification, of doing things with the code. Secondly, and this has been said many times around this table as well, and not at this table, there are nice and I would say relatively easy, low-hanging fruit ways that things that we can do even with the code, without going in that direction that Ken was saying about, deregulating, deleting standards, changing the code, etc. We should not. I think that we should really open-minded, as David say, and assume that in the future, in the next few years, we may need to do a lot of things, but let's not focus on what we are focusing, which is the next few months, how our work and strategy will evolve. And in that respect, I think that there may be things that we can do in terms of the in terms of practical things to make the code more user-friendly. I think this is the word, more user-friendly. That does not create that rejection like 500 pages, etc. We know that sometimes people are speaking about what they don't know, and so I fully agree that we need to get concrete suggestions and comments about what is complex, what is missing, what can we do. I heard in a recent meeting, and I'm not going to say more about this, but someone very much involved in the profession say your code is too complex. It is almost about 100 pages. Wow. So it's that there is a narrative which becomes, someone say and then the other say and then the other say, and sometimes people get to a point where they don't know anymore why this is complex, what's complexity, and etc. But there are things that should not prevent us from assuming, in a humble way, that there are things that we can do and that we probably should be doing to help stakeholders and to help ourselves overcoming some narratives, overcoming some obstacles, and bringing us back a lot of work and energy in trying to solve these complexity-related issues. So I will not put anything aside. I would not exclude anything, but I would probably focus on very quick wins. It's what we are speaking about. Things that are perceived on the one hand as a constructive, collaborative, and concerned response to our stakeholders, but at the same time, which actually is effective. So I think these are the main takeaways. And if we are going to add a bullet on simplification or not, I think that this is to be discussed. But I think that we need to move to the next part of the discussion with these ideas very clear, because now the pain is coming now, because we will need to make decisions, I would say. And for that, I would ask Jeff, please, asking you also as possible to be brief, because time is flowing or flying.
Thanks, Gabriela. We have maybe just 25 minutes before the break, and then a little bit more time perhaps after the break. So this is the second part of our discussion with the board, is to look at, based in light of the discussions we've had on the refinement of this strategic approach, which the board by and large agrees. What does this mean to our work plan in the next 2 years? First of all, in terms of the ongoing project, we will talk about firm culture and governance tomorrow, and which you have received certainly all the papers, including what the project team is proposing anyway. But largely, it's about resequencing our work streams. But we will discuss this tomorrow. In terms of ANI, sustainability and experts, of course, there's no change. But as we have discussed earlier just now, the board, of course, is very clear that that also means in terms of expanding our adoption and implementation work, not just to sustainability, but also the other standards as well. CIVs and pension funds, again, the timeline is no change at this stage. And of course, the project team will come back to the board in September. And then private equity investments in firms. At this stage, you will hear about the draft, and you will discuss the draft staff alert in the next couple of days. And then from there, we can discuss what's next, but there's no change at this stage. Looking at the strategy and work plan development, this is to 2028 to 2031. Just to let the board know that we will commence our development work, pretty much straight after this meeting. So certainly, Rania, we take your comment as well, that we will look at how we're going to do this, and we will develop this in conjunction with IESBA. So we're not just, whilst there may be two separate plans, but they will be very much in sync with each other. So this is something that we will start to work on it quite a bit in the next very soon. And again, we've talked about the last bullet point that we just had in terms of strategy, in terms of the wordings of no new standards. But we have certainly a factor in that we need to leave, and I think there were some comments about resources as well. We do need to, of course, leave some room for emerging issues. So we need to always be prepared for that. And of course, we need to consider whether we need more, we need to allocate more resources to adoption and implementation and to various activities under that theme. And of course, also more resources for stakeholder engagement and communications. And we've heard not to do more, but to do it more cleverly and more efficiently. So going into what is coming up for the remainder of 2025 and 2026. What we have here is listed out the work streams that are due to commence. And the planning committee has some thoughts, certainly some views. And again, like what Gabriela said, they're not set in stone, but certainly very much as a starting point to get the discussion going, get to see what the board thinks. Again, no change to NOCLA, of course, as the post-implementation review, and that's due to start fairly shortly after the June board meeting. In terms of the role of CFOs and other senior PAIBs, you would recall that this work stream, it's about gathering information about the evolving roles of CFOs, including those in similar positions within the public sector, and other PAIBs as well, and identifying perhaps any new ethical issues and challenges that perhaps that needs to be addressed by the code. And you would recall that at the December board meeting last year, we have expanded the information gathering also to CFOs who are not PAIBs. So anyone in that capacity in the office, in the finance office. So what the planning committee had discussed is, given that there is no immediate urgency to commence this project, and align with the thinking of no new standard issuance, and align with our thinking of putting our emphasis perhaps on ANI, the planning committee thought perhaps this is something that we could start in 2026 with further defining what the problem is in terms of problem definition. So really just very much about initial fact finding to define what the public interest issues might be, and identify the possible responses, and including any cost sort of benefits discussion and thinking and analysis. The other project that we have essentially is the profession-agnostic independent standards for those sustainability engagements not scoped in under Part 5, so shorter way to say probably review of Part 4B, is really to the planning committee is thinking that this will still commence in 2025, but again, starting with the problem definition. And you've heard, of course, that there have been opposing comments about whether to commence this project or not. On the one hand, we've heard that mandating and enforcing ethical requirements only on PAs will have certain costs and pricing implications. But at the same time, we've also heard, of course, the more broader comments about slowing down and need time to digest all the other new standards. So it will be a good opportunity for the board in just a moment to discuss in terms of when to commence this project. And then when we move into 2026, again, restructure code, post-implementation review of restructure code. You've heard a little bit earlier, just giving a brief outline on what that project involved. The planning committee was thinking whether there are any merits perhaps to accelerate that to 2025, and if we do have that resource available, to start looking at the restructure code, and as part of that, we will of course perhaps look at some of the simplification considerations, as we would with all the other post-implementation reviews. No change to long association phase 2 post-implementation review. And then the last 2 work streams that are due to start in 2026, the planning committee essentially felt that there was no urgent need to perhaps start, but we basically put that on hold. What that means that we might come back and to review when to start these 2 work streams at a later date. And just to refresh the board's memory, business relationship, essentially this work stream is an independence-related work stream, and the IESBA will, under this work stream, review the different types of relationships that firms or network firms or indeed the audit team members might have with the audit clients. And the management, and consider whether Section 520 of the code sufficiently addresses this new the independence matters relating to these new relationships. So as I mentioned earlier, the PC felt that perhaps this is one work stream that we could hold for now, and we may not commence in 2026, depending on what other additional work or new work that we may be doing under our sort of revised work priority. So with that, Gabriela, we'll pass it back to get the board's feedback.
Thank you so much, Jeff. Yes, now it's time to go down to earth and see what we should and should not do with this strategic approach that we have discussed in the first part. Let me just, because it bridges with the discussion that we'll have, apologize because there was one topic that was discussed during the first part, and I failed to include it in my summary, and it is very relevant, which was the topic that was in the former presentation about no standards until the end of 2026. And there was a mixed or nuanced approach across the table, because I think that there was a general agreement about slowing down, not doing much, but I also heard some concerns about being too assertive and definitive about not doing anything until the end of 2026. Of course, what is there written is that we will not issue, so after a due process until 2026, but still, this is something that I'd like to discuss, to see discussed in conjunction with these decisions that we will need to take with respect to each one of the work lines, because we need to have consistent and truthful communications lines in this respect. So I would not be comfortable if we would be saying one thing just for the sake of, relieving some pressure and marketing a little bit this board, while at the same time we were planning to do something different or etc. So I think that it's preferable maybe not to be that much assertive, because from what I heard around the table, this better reflects the position of the board around, okay, let's slow down. In principle, we won't do anything, but leave us some space. I don't know. I'm just trying to read across the different interventions what would be the way of expressing the board's will in this respect. And now you have here the proposals, the adjustments or the evolution of the strategy and work plan with respect to the different areas of work that we had planned to advance shortly, and that is proposed. We are proposing and suggesting to adjust according to the strategic approach discussed in the first part of the discussion. And I hear you.
Thank you. So I think on the revised work plan, I'm broadly okay with it. The one area that I'm reflecting on a little bit more is the role of CFOs, because they're under so much pressure right now. They're rethinking their profession. They're rethinking a lot of things actively, whether that's because of technology, which is dramatically changing the function within companies, or whether it's the sustainability requirements, which, notwithstanding the regulatory environment, they're often going ahead with, and then it's the connectivity between sustainability and finance, and what does that mean to the profession? So it feels a little bit like we would be remiss if we didn't do something, even if it's on a limited scope basis, to make sure that we've got at least some understanding of where it's going, because they are doing it, notwithstanding what we might do or how we might engage. So it feels prudent to me that we would do something even small scale so that we're ready and we don't fall behind the 8 ball in this particular area, because PAIBs, as I said, they're under a great deal of change and pressure, and it's not going to get any easier for them. So that may be the one area perhaps I would encourage us to think a bit more about. The acceleration of the restructured code, again, I'm broadly okay with that because I think we have to do something. I mean, I think the concerns that have been raised are valid. And as I've said already before, let's just keep an open mind. And I agree with what you said when you summarized, Gabriella, where you said it could be a long journey and it's about picking your low-hanging fruit and moving up to the higher-hanging fruit to ultimately make sure that we've got a good product over a period of time.
Thank you, David. Christelle, please.
So I just want to rebound on what David said. Well, not to have the message that we would put aside the CFO challenge. Maybe it can be embarked on the emerging issues committee, so that we are putting some focus on the relationship with the CFO to get the information as soon as possible. That is, and then to see in this committee if we must suggest something in the rhythm of addressing some issues with the board. So that would answer to maybe to this, which is we do not think it's not important and it can wait 2 or 3 years. We keep alert on the subject, as they are some of our stakeholders. Yes, potentially at least. Yes.
So if I can understand, Christelle, you would be in favor of not delaying everything with respect to CFOs until 2026?
No, it's not a question of not delaying officially the full scope work that we had intended, but keeping in touch with the issue through the emerging issues committee. Yeah. Because if David is saying there's a lot going on with the CFO, okay, let's keep in touch and see what we must bring back to the board and how we can keep ourselves alert to some issues that would eventually need some additional work or some expression on our side, etc.
Okay, noted. Thank you very much. Sunam, please.
Thank you. I believe this proposal was made in consideration of resources available and also room for emerging issues. So I have one question about 2 PIRs, restructured code and loan association. I believe there could be some synergies in doing the 2 things altogether at the same time, but you propose in separation. So I'd like to know, what the consideration was. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sunam. Sorry, I was just taking notes. I don't know who was after, but I think it was Hector. Hector?
Thank you, Chair. I agree with the proposals. I would like to highlight the comment that the post-implementation reviews will include simplification considerations in line with what we were discussing before. And if we are reviewing the restructured code accelerated to 2025, maybe there is room to work on these different proposals we have been juggling as ideas to make the code even more accessible, because the criticism is still there. Even if people can search for words in the electronic version, there's still criticism about the size. So maybe there is something we could do with the guide to the code, which is 3 pages, and it's not part of the standard. It's NAM. Maybe there is something we can do there. Maybe there is something we can do with the volumes, but this could be part of that, and maybe we don't need the bullet in the previous part. And finally, I would not claudicate on the no more standards until the end of 26. I don't think we need to do that.
Sorry, you don't think that we need to do standards, or you don't think that
we need to say in written that we are tying our hands to our back until the end of 2026. We just need to say we're slowing down. We're slowing down the standard setting. We're not adopting. Of course, we are going to be working on new standards. It's the adoption. I completely understand that, James. It's not that we're not going to meet anymore. We are going to be meeting and working, but we are not going to issue anything new. I don't think we need to say that. It just make us weak. Like we're sorry. We promise we're not going to eat more cookies from the jar. We haven't done anything wrong. We have been doing our work.
That's a good perspective, Hector. Thank you. Amajit, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So just a couple of quick comments. One is I'm not very clear on PIR will include simplification considerations. So that is one clarification I wanted. Secondly, in the 2026 list, exploring extending the impact of the code to all preparers of sustainability information, I was just wondering whether hold should apply to this, because it is only an exploratory exercise, but I stand to correction. And one more point is that in case, and I heard probably there's a desire to do more on the ANI, not just sustainability. So if there is a consensus around that, then do you need to reflect that also in the list somewhere? I mean, one is of course ongoing and one is due to commence. Somewhere do we need to reflect that as well in case we agree to go beyond sustainability and PIRs, of course. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Amajit. Tomoyo, please.
Thank you, Chair. I think I generally support this revised work plan, and really I think it's a good idea to accelerate the restructured code discussion, because I think and everybody to discuss what's the problem about this one, because there are a couple of views why we need this restructuring. One is probably that the accessibility, usability things, but my concern is, my question is this code principle based, or it's quite detailed? It looks like rule based, and probably that's the kind of people feeling complicated, maybe needs restructuring. And we have been discussing in the farm culture and governance part, if this is the, it might be a good idea to have a standard for FCG, but is this the current code structure works for this topic is always discussed. And also, again, how to influence the PA is another. So there are a couple of many things that we should get on the same page. So I think it will be a good idea to discuss about restructuring the code as a kind of priority. And then going back to the previous page, for the CIBs, it says no change, but hearing to some of the feedback from the stakeholders, there are some comments that do we need to revise the code. So depending on how this feedback of the CP and how the code should look like going forward may impact this CIB discussion is something we might need to think of. And finally, for the CFO one, I just want to clarify. So the original plan was to do fact-finding this year and issue a ED next year and finalize in 2027. Does this mean that we are delaying 1 year? And this fact-finding means the same as commensurate problem definition means the same as fact-finding. And that's one question. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tomoyo. Vanya, please.
I'm also supportive on the proposal new work plan. And I agree with Hector that we do not need to declare that there will be no new standards until 2026, because, and we don't even have to say that we are slowing down because it's a negative aspect. But the question is, I have not declared that there will be no new standard because realities change. What we are looking at today is completely different from what we planned to do last meeting in March. So we must leave room for any change that might arise in the horizon.
Thank you, Vanya. Rania, please.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to take a slightly different, I have a slightly different perspective on things. So the way I see it, we received certain concerns. We became aware of certain concerns by our stakeholders. And I mean, we've been listening to them and we decided to listen to them, to address them, to factor them in. And when I look at the proposed revisions, what I see is that we just basically addressed one concern, which is to slow things down. But regarding the other issues, for example, the issue of profession agnostic standards, I mean, I see that we're going to like move forward, I guess slowly, because we're commencing with a problem definition, but it's still there on the table. Other things that, you know, Tomoyo mentioned as well, like CIVs and so on, the issue of the size of the standards, perhaps the size of the standard, the complexity, perhaps going into too much detail. So if I want to reflect on what we've been saying this whole day, and I mean, my understanding is that the position of the board is to pause and conduct some internal reflection on how we do things and how we see our code evolving. I think perhaps it is premature to make any decisions right now on what we want to like commence or perhaps decide on some of the projects that we want to continue with, because like, for example, firm culture and governance, the PIR, but I would keep those limited. I agree certainly with what Hector said. We don't need to commit ourselves like any standard setting before 2026. We don't owe anybody any explanation or whatever. But I think since we have decided to pause and since we have decided to listen to those concerns, perhaps it is an opportunity for us to pause, really conduct some internal reflection and decide how we want to move forward with our code. If we want to, let's say, I mean, the issue of simplifying it, our approach to standard setting, so on and so forth, I think that takes a priority. And given resources, I think we should give that our full attention, and then we decide what we want to commence and when, and with a problem definition or what, or perhaps we might decide like certain projects we're going to like put completely on the aside for the time being. Yeah, so this is my opinion.
Thank you, Rania. Chana, please.
Just to remind everyone that we are in June 2025. So there's only 6 months of the 2025 you see there to go. So it's not really a year in the first year. So we have to be realistic on what we can do in the 6 months that's left of 2025, keeping in mind all the other things that we have. With the, I sort of agree a little bit with Sunam on the restructured code and long association that could go together. And if we have a resource constraint, that would be something I would just leave in 2026, the restructured code, because that could consume resources once you get into it. And the other thing is, if people are coming and complaining about, the issues, the length of the code, and that it needs to be restructured, I would like to also hear from the firms, because they are the ones who have to deal with a lot of the requirements, whether they are having problems. And if they are not, I would suggest that the other people who are complaining are not really using the code. Because everything, like I'm with Ken, that we can't be rewriting this because things have been put there for a reason. And if the firms who use most of it are also having a problem, then yes, let's discuss it and address that issue. But I think some of the others who are complaining, they are not using the code.
Thank you very much, China. So mindful of the time, we are already 5 minutes beyond schedule, so I'm not meeting the expectations that the session would end on time. So I'd ask, of course, I don't want to prevent you from speaking, but ask you please to be as focused as possible. Rich, please.
Yes, I think I understand why we wanted to say no new standards before end of 2026. I was at the SAC and I heard what the other board said, but which made sense. And I think practically and just naturally in our process, we don't have anything we'd be getting out by the end of 2026 anyways. It's just not scheduled. The only thing I'm a little cautious about is if we are delving into some of these things that someone suggests might be a short-term project, or if we discover some problems that have been pointed out, say on the private equity investment front, it's possible we might have something possible to do, or maybe we can keep it to guidance in the latter case. But I'm not troubled by saying that, but I think it's how we message that people need to understand. It's not that we're not going to work on a standard or a project. We're going to certainly do a whole bunch of projects. Some of them might have standard activities in them, some of them might not. It's just that I don't see reasonably even getting an exposure draft out by the end of 2026, given Chana's comment that we're at the end of June. So maybe there's a way to clarify that a little bit or explain it a little more robustly so that it gets the message that there isn't a lot coming. People who need a break to catch up with translation and implementation and adoption get that. We frankly have been at a frenetic pace of standard setting for a number of years. And so maybe there's a way to better explain that. But it's factually accurate, I think.
Thank you very much, Rich. It's about how much marketing we do about this obvious result. So thank you. Luigi, please.
Yeah, thank you. 2 comments, basically. I don't think it is really important how we say or write what's happened before or after 2026. We receive a number of requests to pause a bit, to think about other things, to support the implementation of the new standards already issued and just issued that could present challenges that we all know, and we are working. We start working on this matter. The key matter is that we effectively pause down and give time to everyone to implement what it is there without overloading too much the system. And under another perspective, as already mentioned by others, this is the natural course of action in the next 18 months, because if we apply the due process in the due time, there will not be a very significant new standard. There could be limited projects or narrow projects, depending on the facts and circumstances. But I think we need to be very careful in what we would like to communicate and how we communicate them, just to avoid creating additional risk of not being understood.
Okay, thank you very much, Luigi. So Sadia, please.
So I want to touch on the same issue. I think that even though it's already known that there's nothing that's new that's going to be effective in 2026, it will alleviate some fears on the amount of work that has come through from this board onto PAOs and firms and national standard setters, jurisdictional standard setters. I think it's important for us to send that messaging because there's that concern that there's a lot of changes and this would alleviate it. Maybe one of the solutions is saying that there is nothing that's going to be effective in that period, and that effectiveness would be something that we already know. None of the projects that we are mentioning over here would be able to be standard setting projects that will become effective before December 2026. But it gives that 18 months that no jurisdiction will have to adopt. I've been counting, every year we've had a new amendment. And just giving a grace period of 1 year to catch up if you haven't caught up, translate, hone in on those things, it would be good messaging rather than reactive messaging.
Thank you very much, Sadia. Yohei, please.
Thank you, Chair. So I support the overall proposal, and in particular, focusing on A&I, especially for sustainability-related standards, and engagement and communication with stakeholders are particularly important. And in addition, FCG, farm culture governance, remains important, and necessary consideration should be continue to be made on a resequenced based. And my point is that practices for sustainability assurance have yet to be established, and additional issues and burdens will be become apparent in the future. Since substantial resources will be required to address those issues, resource allocations should be prioritized. And regarding engagement and communication with stakeholders, it's important to continue to focus on activities to support the application and to obtain sufficient understanding from stakeholders of the global standard for sustainability. I hope that increased confidence in the international standards will prevent fragmentation of the standard. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Yohei. Tomoyo?
Thank you, Chair. Just to be clear on my previous comments about accelerating restructured code, I'm proposing to accelerate the discussion around the restructuring the code and not the action to restructure the code. I want to be clear. And why I think we should start the discussion about these topics is because this may impact other projects as well. So I'm not asking to start restructuring the code immediately, but just start the discussion. Sorry, thank you.
Thank you for the clarification. Tomoyo Obichukwu, please.
Thank you. I just want to add my support to what David said on the role of CFOs and other senior PAIVs. That I think is good we commented this year. It's of 2026. And then the profession agnostic independent standards maybe shifted to 2026. Thank you. And then the restructured
you.
code 2026. Thank you.
Thank you, Obichukwu. And finally, Ken, please.
Yes, and I'll be very brief. Yes, so there are a couple of options with regard to the post-implementation reviews as to whether, in fact, there is a possibility to combine the no-cloud PIR with the PIR for the restructured code. The reason why there will be a strong reason to combine the PIRs is because as we are undertaking the PIRs, we're going to be reaching out to a lot of stakeholders. And as we do so, it would make a lot of sense to try to be as effective and as efficient and as synergistic as possible. So undertaking at least 2 of those PIRs together would make a lot of sense, because then stakeholders can respond to any requests for information or engagement with regard to those topics at the same time. The PIR non-association has a bit more to it than meets the eye, I would say, because part of the commitment for this PIR in our strategy and work plan is, in fact, to explore or to undertake a study with regard to the issue of mandatory firm rotation. So this is not so much a review of what's already in the code. It is part of that, but the other part of it is also to undertake a study of the experience that jurisdictions have gone through that have already implemented mandatory firm rotation, and that is a very significant endeavor, as you can imagine. So my sense would be, and that's probably a suggestion that the planning committee can consider and bring back to the board, is to advance a restructured code to 2025 as proposed, but to combine this with the no-cloud PIR, and then to have the two together.
Thank you very much, Ken. Well, I think that we don't have anyone else. I'd like to ask Tego. Tego, you have been very silent. Of course, you know that whenever you want to speak, you are free to do it and very welcome. But before we close this session, I'd like to ask you if you want to add something, make some comments.
Thank you, Chair. And again, wonderful to be part of the deliberations today and observation. I just wanted to I think, start off by commending the board for having opened themselves up to receiving feedback. Sometimes feedback can be tough to take in, but I think the general deliberations for today says the board is applying its mind to the feedback. And this is one key pillar in terms of responsiveness to stakeholders. And I just want to encourage, I think some of the board members have actually said it today, that to keep an open mind such that you can land in a situation that is beneficial to those that we are really interacting with. From a PIOB perspective, we are indeed still encouraging the board to keep front of mind public interest mandate in everything that we do. And as such, I really want to comment that the whole day has been dedicated to really evaluating different kinds of feedback from all stakeholders and really paying attention to what is coming through and trying to find a win-win situation at the end of the day in the public interest. So, Madam Chair, let me stop there for now, and I'll allow the board to continue. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tego, for your comments and for commending the board's discussions. We will now close for a break, but before that, just 2 minutes or 1 minute, just to try to summarize what we heard here, so that we don't lose anything along the way. So there were proposals to there were some comments about or some concerns about delaying or apparently delaying the CFO project, with some comments from 3 members of the board, I think, about the imperative of taking this, well, at least not delaying it too much, or starting doing thing, or keeping connected, or whatever, like Christelle said. Many comments about the restructured code connected to the topic of simplification, I think. So the urgency or the imperative of thinking about simplification, I think that is driving this idea that we need to anticipate, and that's what's proposed there. So there is nothing different to be said about than what is being proposed. The Ken made or there was a suggestion from Sunam. Then can refine the suggestion by saying, okay, we can bundle some of the PIRs. It would be good for the resources allocation and efficiency and etc. So some proposals to bundle some of the PIRs, namely the restructured code, with other things like NOCLA or long association, which may bring problems, like Ken said. About the reference to no new standards, I'm very pleased about this discussion because this again speaks about the quality and the honesty of this board. So what I heard here is, okay, we need to give some confidence to stakeholders that we are not going to flood them with standards over the next times, but we are not that much concerned about making commitments that we may not be able to meet, or making commitments in a way that may create perceptions which is not exactly what we want to do. And that again, thank you very much, because I'm always very pleased about the honesty of this board. So we will see what to do with these comments about committing or not committing. We know that nothing is going to happen significantly until the end of 2026. So why announce it? But we want to announce something just to provide some certainty that we will not be doing anything very significant or issuing anything very significant. But these comments were actually very useful. There was a proposal to pause, reflect, and go. I think it was Rania. I think that Rania, it's what we are doing now. It's what we are doing now. We are pausing to reflect. I don't think that we should delay this decision, also because there are things along the way in our strategy and work plan, and we need to satisfy stakeholders about their questions about what are you going to do with this that you had promised. So we need to move. We need to make decisions. We cannot be stuck in these dilemmas. But of course, I take your comment that we should keep on reflecting about ourselves, about the code, about the direction, etc. And there is something which is not there in the presentation, and Ken, I think that we had discussed that in our internal discussions, which is, of course, this will always be subject to some reassessment at some point, right? Any decisions that we make today or tomorrow, this week, about this is going to be next month or next year, etc. I think that we should commit to get back to these decisions by the end of the year or first quarter of 2026, and at least, and see if this all remains valid and appropriate. Otherwise, as always, we will be agile and we'll adjust as necessary. So I think that this has to be left clear as well. So I think these were the main takeaways. There was something that was not that much discussed, and at some point in time this week we will need to discuss it, which is the sustainability, the professional agnostic independent standards for sustainability assurance engagements, not scoped under Part 5. But we will need to discuss this because we will need to make a decision, and it's not an easy decision. Probably we need to hear more from stakeholders, from the profession, from others, about what's the right approach, because I think that in a very superficial reaction, stakeholders will say, no standards, we don't want more standards. But on reflection, or upon reflection, maybe stakeholders may come to another conclusion about the urgency or not of developing this standard. But this is something that we will at some point need to address. So with this, I will break now. We will break now. We are very late, and I'm sorry for that, namely for those observing online. We will break now and come back at 4:30. 4:30, we will be back. Thank you very much for this wonderful discussion. Okay, thank you very much for being back for the last part of today's session. Still on the same topic, this is a full day of reflection about ourselves, about how we better serve the public interest, what's the way forward, how we adjust, how we readjust, etc. And this last session about the strategic role of communication and engagement at IESBA comes at the end of a discussion and conversation where communications and strategy were present since the start of the day until now. This is not completely new. I would say that we were seeing the future already from a few time now. When last year we decided to create the adoption and implementation working group, and it was not a fully well understood initiative by the time. 1 year after, or less than 1 year after, it's clear that we were already seeing how a little bit how the future would evolve. And anticipating that future. The same happened with communications. We started trying to improve our communications and strategic communications and engagement since the start of this year. So this is all becoming very meaningful and very consistent in terms of our approach to everything that we do. We will now have a presentation. Who will present, will make a presentation about how everything, or at least part of what we have discussed today and the way we want to approach the future can be captured in a strategic communications plan and approach and some communication, strategic communication lines around which we might want to agree, so as to make sure that not only we serve the purpose or we serve the objectives that we have been discussing of being more accessible, better understood, of enhancing the potential of the standards in working for the public interests, reaching to more people, more stakeholders in a better way, avoid misunderstandings, and enhance the credibility of the board, etc. How we can not only capture this into some communication lines, but also ensure that we are all consistent when we are speaking about and communicating about what the IESBA purpose, objectives, and approach is, to avoid different voices saying different things and going along different lines. So Rui, with this, thanking you in advance, I'll give you the floor for this presentation.
Thank you very much, Chair. So good afternoon to all. So this is basically the result of some of the things that we discussed in our last board meeting, in the March board meeting, including some of the risks and opportunities that the board has identified. Also reflects a bit of the thinking of constructed over the last 3 months or so around some of the topics that we have, or most of the topics that we have been discussing during the day. So let me briefly walk you through today's presentation. We'll start with key developments since March, including a confirmed risk and opportunity assessment and highlights from our benchmarking exercise. This benchmarking exercise, we'll go deeper into it. We shared this intention with the board in the March meeting. It was done by our team, Jake, Astu, and Dave. Dave, by the way, is not here due to personal issues, but he would love to be here with us discussing the results. So that is a relevant point. We went, as you'll see, we went looking for what others are doing, searching good ideas. Then I'll move into introduce a proposed framework. We are calling it IESBA Smart, that aims to guide us how we could translate our strategic plan into action. And then I'll detail a bit how could that framework impact our communications going forward. As regarding the benchmarking exercise, we've reviewed 12 institutions, from regulators like PCAOB and FRC to ethics leaders, institutions like Accountability and the Carnegie Council. You have some good in the appendices. We've shared some of the ideas that we came across as good examples that we could use, and I'll be happy to discuss those. and we focus mainly on two areas: websites, so looking at structure, tone, accessibility of using the website, and social media, the platforms where institutions are present, frequency of engagement, the engagement formats, including analyzing key board members and outreach activities from these institutions. This, on our view, as I shared, it was not kind of a branding exercise. It was exactly looking for specific practical examples of things that we could use to improve, evolve in the way we communicate. From that exercise, we came with 10 recommendations for website and social media. For the website, I will highlight the opportunities that we have identified to elevate the mission of IESBA, to simplify our language, to better target audiences, to improve navigation and the news section in our website, and to enhance readability of publications. And as regards social media, some of the opportunities we have identified is the try to keep our posts shorter, more engaging, diversify content, especially towards video and interactive formats, and support the board's visibility online. These are, in fact, some of these ideas. If you look, well, maybe you still have to look very carefully, but hopefully in the future it will be more clear to all. But we have already some examples of some of the ideas that are here in the type of communication that we have been doing in the last months. I will not spend more time here, because when we get to the implication of this IESBA Smart on the communications, we can go into more specific examples. So on our next slide, key developments in March, risks and opportunities. So basically here, what we've tried to do is highlight that the risks and opportunities that the board has identified as more relevant since June, in March, have since become even more relevant, I would say, and the discussions today, during the day, I think they are a good example of that. So regarding the external landscape, three major risks stood out in March, and all developments since then have confirmed them. First, a growing backlash against regulation compliance burdens. Second, some resistance to new requirements, especially in evolving areas like sustainability. And third, the risk of disengagement, stakeholders basically tuning out or deprioritizing ethics, given the agenda and the problems and the pressures that they are also facing. As regards opportunities, the board has identified also some areas where we may have the ability to make a difference and actually have some additional impact or increased impact. One is a clear appetite for simplification, making ethical standards easier to understand and apply. Stakeholders want engagement. That's basically a two-way, accessible and timely approach to the way we relate to stakeholders. And ethics and our code is probably even more relevant to promote trust, consistency and resilience in a world where we have lots of visibility, of instability, volatility, and less, let's say, detailed or prescriptive rules. This all to say that given what we've seen, given the thinking and the discussions in the last months, we do believe that IESBA can meet, let's say, the moment and react. That's a bit of what we've been discussing all day on how could we fine-tune the strategy and the working plan going forward to meet that let's say, a new phase or a new positioning, or positioning ourselves to these challenges. And what we'll try to do next is could we find a way that could align us on a way to view our action going forward. That's what I would say, some clarity of action. And for that, what we to respond strategically, we've shaped this framework that I've been talking about. It hopes or tries to synthesize our thinking and what we've heard from stakeholders. This is IFAC and all the institutions around it, GAA, roundtables, GSS, SEC, others. And can we find something that offers a coherent direction to what we're doing? We are calling it IESBA Smart, and I would stop here a bit just to reflect a bit on, we've heard all morning, all day, this idea that, well, we'll need to do better communications, we'll need to do better communications, and we do, definitely. But it is irrelevant to consider that communications is really, it should be embedded in the decisions. It is a visible part of the work, but the structural work is done elsewhere in some sense, or is at least just a part of the structural work that the institution develops. And so this is relevant to think about what can communication offer and what it cannot offer. It is relevant to think what is communication. Communication is what the 3 or 4 of the communications teams do, but it's every person around this table when they interact, when they decide, when they put out there the messages. And this also means that the IESBA Smart is, I would see it not simply or only as a communications concept, but a way of thinking, of operating, of engaging. And of course, that has a really big component of communications, but I would invite us, keep an open mind, as someone said, to this idea that this is not, I would say, essentially just a communications tool. What does IESBA Smart stand for? Simplification, mobilization, adoption, responsiveness, and targeted action. So this was a way to try to synthesize the ideas or the discussions and the way to react to the challenges that we have been discussing and analyzing in the last months. So of course, this means that we should aim for bigger simplification, for mobilization of all stakeholders, for adoption of our code, responsiveness, targeted action. This is a way to capture underline IESBA's action going forward and turning our strategy into focused, visible, stakeholder-centric action. This slide will explain a bit what we mean by simplification. So by smart, so simplification about making the code and our messaging easier to understand, essentially. Mobilization, focusing on partnerships, on outreach, on engagement tools. Adoption, ensuring the support implementation and the uptake of our standards. Responsiveness means listen actively. And an important thing here is showing that we have actually heard what we have listened. That's a relevant point in communication. It relates to this idea of two-way communication. And of course, targeted action, which calls for more targeted communications to specific stakeholders, fine-tuning our messages to the profiles of the stakeholders. So what could this mean for communication? So what we are proposing here, and then we'll go into more detail. I won't go into all the topics that are there. We'd be happy to discuss them, but I'll just give you a very brief description of what we're looking at. So under simplification, we would say that simplification will guide the way, or hopefully we will make an effort that simplification can guide the way we write, the way we present, the way we design things. We will develop some revisions to our homepage content, simplify titles and summaries, produce more accessible materials, try to develop what we are calling snapshots, and also giving life to an idea that has been floating around for quite a few months, I would say even maybe years, which is this idea of a blog or a place where we can share messages in a clearer way to a more general audience. We will also streamline content production flows within our team. So it's kind of it's simplifying to the outside and also trying to simplify and optimize the work internally. On mobilization, for communication, mobilization would mean boosting our visibility and voice. So we'll try to increase op-eds. So we've been already trying to do that with good results. We'll try to partner with institutions, improve branding. On social, we'll focus on higher quality visuals, shorter posts, more engaging content, quizzes, videos, interviews. Again, some of this we are already trying to do, namely quizzes, more videos. We have been publishing that in the last months. We do have to be cautious here though, because this is a long road. It requires time, it requires resources. So it's something that we will be building over time, and I would not like the presentation to be seen as something that we are just kind of in the next 2 or 3 months we'll just be booming all these ideas. This is a view on the way we want to move forward, rather than something that we think could gain life in the next 2 or 3 months. But we should be able to give life to this in the next, I don't know, 12 to 18 months. Hopefully, I think we could get most of these ideas working. So time and resources permitting, we will also be exploring new social media platforms like Instagram, but to reach the broader audiences. But again, this is more of a short-term approach at this, the medium-term approach at this point. On adoption, so basically here I was joking with John talking with John just a while ago. We won't miss work, so it's saying adoption and implementation and in communications in the coming months. At least listening to the discussion around the table.
Sorry for interrupting you. I think that you need to move the slides.
Oh, sorry.
It's the next one. Yes.
Here, as always, communications is really at the service of the organization. That's the way we view it and how it should be. And of course, it's at the service of the adoption and implementation strategy. So communications will support the adoption efforts. That's the best thing I think we can do. We will work closely with the ANI working group. And we will, on the strictly comms side, we will make an effort to highlight success stories, early adopters, new standards coming into effect. That's part of the way we are viewing the work going forward. And finally, now it's close to the end on responsiveness. So we would like to create more listening opportunities. And again, listen and show that we are listening. So likely we would make an effort to have more surveys or mechanisms to learn more about our stakeholders, what they're thinking and how they're viewing us. We will probably also publicize our outreach activities on our website. We think, and there's something that was discussed also today here, that it is relevant for IESBA to make an effort to make its due process more visible, more have stakeholders understand a bit better exactly all the effort that we do to fill this all the requirements so that we fulfill the due process mechanism. And again, this has also been discussed. It's about closing the loop, and James in the morning talked a bit about this. And increasing trust and strengthening dialogue with stakeholders. And finally, on targeted action, we will make an effort to segment our content and messaging by stakeholders. Likely segmentation would be preparers, auditors, preparers, smaller practices, and then investors and others. This is something that, of course, we would have to discuss and fine-tune, but this is probably the way we would see it viable to develop. We'll tailor explanations to stakeholders. We'll try to develop target explainers. Again, try to be more intentional and more targeted on the way we relate to our stakeholders. And hopefully we would have this communication and the engagement plans also better aligned and fine-tuned with maps, with a map of risk and audiences that could help us choose the right priorities. So I will end now. As I said, I think this is an ambitious plan for the next year and a half. Some of the elements were already outlined in the March communications plan. Others are now more concrete, more developed, maybe more urgent also. As always, delivering the goals will require resources, time, planning, but I would say that importantly, it really depends on the way we as an institution see ourselves and relate to others, and communications can help with that. But I think it's, let's say, in some sense, more profound challenge than just kind of going to a single, say, or at least narrow view of what communications can offer. This is exactly why we've stressed that SMART is not a communications tool. In essence, it's an operational mindset, a logic that can guide us relate to others. And well, we've spent the day exploring major challenges and opportunities. So I'll close with this, with a small provocation and hand it to Gabrielle and the board. That is, having heard this and on the discussions that we've had, is how do you think we could be smarter? Thank you.
Thank you, Rui. Thank you very much for the presentation and for the great work behind this presentation. This is really moving forward. So instead of commenting myself, at least for now, I'd like to open the floor here for comments and questions that the board may have about what this presentation brings in terms of how you see it. Is it what we need? Do we need more? Do we need to adjust what this IESBA Smart brings you? If you think it's really something that may allow some coherence and consistency in our not only communication but action, and I'm taking a step forward or beyond. So I'd like to hear, after having heard all afternoon about the importance of communications and communicating better. I think this is really closing the feedback loop and giving a response to what the board is asking for. But I hear you, Nancy, please.
Thank you. And I'm glad I'm first because I'm so excited about what you just presented. I was just really impressed. In fact, Sadia, Elaine, and I were talking during the break about this discussion about simplification and what does that mean with the code. And I think what you've laid out specifically with trying to address some of those, the code is complicated. I mean, it is because these are complicated discussions, but you've laid out an approach to take these into sound bites and present them in ways that effectively allow users to become aware. They don't have to become experts, but getting them aware of what their responsibilities are in the code. And so specifically with respect to how we get this information out, and we are in an environment where sound bites matter, right? We're in a TikTok world, these short, brief bursts of information. And, you know, I may not be the target group for TikTok, but I am overwhelmed with information. And so this ability to give me information in short bursts that gets it on my radar screen, I think this is just an outstanding idea, and I'm fully supportive. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nancy. Mark, please.
Thank you. Also very supportive of the proposals. I think, you know, sort of picking up on what Nancy said, there are a lot of our stakeholders who won't read the basis for conclusions that comes alongside a standard that we issue, but actually they might listen to a 10 or 15-minute podcast which explains what we've done and why we've done it. So this is a real opportunity to look at raising our engagement through a more diverse sort of set of tools rather than just one. I think the other thing that is a real opportunity for us, particularly with your proposals around responsiveness and the mobilization piece as well, and also I suppose that the proposals around segmenting our stakeholders, this is not just about the communication of what the board does. It's about the fact that all of this is a source of insight and understanding that we can bring back into the board through the communication that we do and the engagement that it supports. So I think this is a great set of proposals, and look forward to seeing how it rolls out.
Thank you very much, Mark. Paul, please.
Thanks a lot. If anything, okay, one, agree with the approach. But I think it really helps us speak to that burning question of what's your value proposition, because we need to speak to what we deliver in public interest to validate that, the fundamentals of that value proposition. My question is the reality of the media communication system always jumps at the negative, highlight where it's not been done, rather than tends to be very kind of lukewarm responses to best case scenarios. So just wanted to understand some of the thinking of how we can turn that corner so we don't seem to be driving negativity, but actually channeling positivity and giving direction setting. Thanks.
Thank you, Paul. David, please.
Thank you. I would echo what Nancy said when she opened her remarks. I think what you're doing is really fresh, it's really innovative, and it's exciting. The two things I would urge you to keep in mind is one on the suggestion for blogs for staff and board. Think about how you keep it coherent. Otherwise, it could be a collection of all kinds of ways of talking, all kinds of ways of communicating. And I think that will actually divert from what you're trying to do. And the second thing I would say is be very mindful about how much you put out there, because there's already this concept of overload. I agree with Mark. Something in a 10-minute podcast is far more effective than a written document, but volume around just quantity of stuff could end up overwhelming too. And again, take away from what you're trying to do. But directionally, I love it. The idea is, I think it's really clever. It's about staying coherent. So it still keeps that professionalism, that polish, but it comes together in a way that's much more accessible.
Thank you, David. Sadia, please.
So I too am excited about this, and also very pleased that everything I would have thought of is already covered in here. I'm really glad you started with the website. I think that's how people are introduced to IESBA, because that's the first time they're going to engage with the code in our documents. I love that there were various aspects of here that allowed us to collaborate. I think that beyond the people in this table, there's other role players that has been mentioned previously, or sponsors that you want to call them, that you probably want to engage with in podcast conferences, and it allows for that cross-border. I also like that it was cross-generational, and we must acknowledge that there's different generations that are in our profession, and we must engage with all of them. So there was aspects that gathers to them. What I would be interested in is the data that comes with these things. What are people engaging with? So we know what we need to focus on, or why people haven't focused on a particular NAM or a document that we thought was very great. Maybe a staff prize for the most downloaded publication. But jokes aside, I do think that the data will drive us in the right direction on what is being used. So there's another thing that I wanted to mention, probably on how you implement it, and that's probably going to be your next thinking, is that we need to build habits. So with communication, if you expect something to come out every Tuesday, people tend to wait for it because they've engaged once or twice, and every Tuesday becomes IESBA Tuesday. There's also many jurisdictions that have CPD related to ethics. And if we do this correctly, that might be the leverage of people actually using IESBA documents to in value with their jurisdiction in order to not have to duplicate it yourself, because IESBA is providing this guidance.
Thank you, Sadia. Rui, if at any moment you want to respond to anything, just let us know. Otherwise, I'll go around, okay? So, Obichukwu, please.
Thank you. So I think the strategy, the SMART, is very great. I was very pleased when I saw it. And I think that the operations, not only communication, operations as in standard setting, we can also borrow that leaf, SMART. And I just want to make some suggestions on the targeted, target stakeholder, something like that, that we should also include include resources or communication for professional accountants in business. Even though they might fall under the preparer, but we should also have content for them, because they are actually diverse. They have internal auditors, they have different things, so that we can engage them. We also have to include content for the academia. Is very, very important, because from what we've heard, or what I've heard, most universities don't even do ethics in their curriculum. So our code can be something for them to use, and that is something that we can, when we push it for the academia, we have something for them. We can engage the younger accountants so that as they are coming in, they're already prepared ethically. So that's my point. And then on the adoption, I also want to suggest again that we can also have like certificate courses certificate courses on different parts of the standard, it can help people to engage and adopt and for adoption of our standards. Thank you.
Thank you, Obichukwu. Amajit, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So I think it was very comprehensive presentation, a lot of rich ideas there, and I see tremendous potential if we do it right. What I heard, I think idea is to implement these changes over a year and a half. So maybe I would suggest if you want to prioritize some of the items because there are a number of areas which have been indicated in the presentation. If you want to prioritize the changes, that would be a good. Also, I would echo, what Mark and David said. I think podcast could be really very useful. So maybe we could have a flagship IESBA podcast and even, podcasts on some real world ethical dilemmas. People are not really fully conversant. I guess some such communications could also be useful. So I'll just pause with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Amajit. Rania, please.
Thank you. I second Amarjit's comment. It's a very, very comprehensive plan, very ambitious and really very exciting. And I think you've really said it all in there, but I would add perhaps one detail, which is you may want to consider developing a rubric for audience profiling. Because I think, and this has been also touched upon by colleagues around the table, we have such a broad, heterogeneous stakeholder group, and they belong to different age groups, they consume information differently, they have different concerns. So for example, if you're looking to deliver a message or to convey a message to regulators, you probably want to do it by, I don't know, through a press release or something, or a white paper or consultation. But if we're looking at accounting professionals, then perhaps podcasts or Instagram or YouTube or a video or an infographics or something. And then in that case, you'd have to consider what messages you want to craft for which stakeholder group. For example, if we're looking at explaining the code or simplifying certain parts of the code, then you're probably addressing or targeting accountants. Investors, I don't know, perhaps you want to promote the code. You want investors to demand that assurance and the reporting has been done, and in accordance with standards. So different messages should be targeted to different groups and using different means and methodologies. So I just add that there. Thank you.
Thank you, Rania. Luigi, please.
Yeah, thank you. I like a lot the presentation and the ambition that has been set here. I really appreciate it. If I have to provide a recommendation, the recommendation is to also think about a governance process. We are dealing here with the communication process of a standard setter, and therefore the messages should be the right one, focused on the necessary messages or appropriate messages with the right tone and so on. I have no doubt that this will be dealt in a proper way, but I think in this respect, a proper governance is really needed in order to ensure that in all moments there are alignment with the strategy, with the ambition that has been set, and also with the messages that the board and the planning committee, or those that need to have an oversight on this process, have defined to deliver.
Thank you very much, Luigi. I think that you have finished.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I don't see anyone else. Okay, Rui, Sorry, back to you. I think that you may want to react to some of the comments.
Well, thank you. I don't think there's that much to react to. So thank you very much for the comments, obviously. And I would take from here, so all the recommendations on specific aspects, but I would say that probably they can fit into two of the recommendations that were here. There is devising a good planning of the way of the work going forward and the governance of how we can do this in a way that is consistent and delivers basically what we want, which is basically to value, they say, or make it clear what exactly is our value proposition for each of our stakeholders, and having our code adopted and let's say the value of ethics in accounting clearly perceived by our audiences, and I think that's the challenge now. So on my side, I just thank you very, very much for all the warnings, and I would, if you were generous enough to keep thinking about this and make more suggestions, or at any point in time going forward, that will be really helpful. And of course, we'll keep on engaging. Thank you.
Thank you. Who can, please?
Yeah, and maybe just a suggestion from my perspective, Ray, as you think about basically what is it that the communications team can do in support of the board's strategic focus areas and strategic work plan and so forth. I think one area that I think would really benefit from perhaps greater awareness and understanding is basically the relationship between IESBA and IFIAM, the foundation, as well as with respect to IFAC. Because if you were to go to the IESBA, sorry, about the tab about IESBA on the website, it is really just about the board, the board composition, terms of reference and the like. But there isn't any, if you were really new to IESBA and you would go to this tab, you wouldn't know that IESBA is actually a part of IFIA. So if you can think about it, or if the team can think about how to bring some awareness, greater awareness about the relationship between IESBA and IFIA, and for that matter, IESBA as well, and essentially the governance arrangements, within that ecosystem, I think that'd be very helpful. And I raise this also in the context of what we know to be a lot of misunderstanding and lack of awareness out there. I think David at some point raised an issue with us in, I think, one of a stakeholder or a publisher somewhere in the Middle East kind of had misunderstood the interaction between, or at least the where IESBA actually was housed, and there was still a perception that IESBA was a part of IFAC, and the code that this board issues is an IFAC code as opposed to an IESBA code, and so all of that kind of misunderstanding that I think shouldn't be too difficult to try to address if there were information on the website that really would give stakeholders a clear understanding of what this board does, who it is, and how it kind of relates to other players in the as I say, in the ecosystem. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ken. Unfortunately, I think it's not only in the Middle East. I think that where I go, and I'm in many places, this confusion persists, remains, and it's sometimes a bit concerning because people find out in real time that that's not anymore the case. So I fully support promoting a little bit more or explaining a little bit more where we are now. So if there are no other comments, let me just say a few things about this. First of all, Nancy, I liked very much your point about you're not a TikTok user, but it exists. There is a different generation coming after. Of course, not after you, but after me. And that different generation not only is a TikTok user, but we know that, and this applies to many things, they are not prone, people are not prepared to read long documents, long books, and to do research to understand what they want, the information to come clear, fast, immediate. And that's probably what we are missing. And then we can have a code, we can have everything, but people want to understand immediately automatically what's this about, get the big lines in front of their eyes, what's the IESBA, what's the code, and etc. And that's the reality. We may like it or not like it, but that's the truth. And that's how communications is working. And it's not only about it's not about communications. Communications translate the appetite and a certain culture or certain way of being. So we need to be aware of that. And I think that's very much what we also need to do, be it through the website, be it through documents, be it through podcasts, videos, anything that can give a very quick, smart, simple idea to people about what we are or what we do or about what the standards are. I've seen this week something that was published somewhere about tax ethics standards for tax planning, and it's amazingly obvious, simple, quick. In 3 minutes, you read and you say, okay, you have get the idea about what it is. And what you said about people do not all have to be experts. And for instance, this idea, no, people can go to the website and click if they want to look for something. But before they want to look for something, we need to make them want to look for something. And that's the barrier, that's real, what we are missing. Then we can have all the materials and all the things, but it's that gap between where people are and where the code, the IESBA, and the standards are that we need to overcome. And this is a real big challenge for us. So segmentation of audiences, I think it was also here around. We need to speak, and it was in the former discussion as well. We need to speak in different ways to different audiences, and we also need to understand what the priorities are. And it's interesting because I think that I heard Rui, I'm not sure, over the last few days saying, I think that we need to do something for the PAIBs. I don't know what was the idea, but there are many. Probably much more in terms of number than auditors and etc. And we are probably not doing enough to get to them in terms of understanding making them understand the ethics and the governance and alignment. I think it was Luigi, for sure. That's what we are trying to do here, even with the SMART, is to make sure that we have a consistent, fully agreed and understood set of lines of communications that allow us to be coherent, consistent, to speak at one voice, which is something that this board must do to ensure our relevance and credibility. So I encourage you to see the rest of the presentation that we decided not to share because probably time constraints and etc. But I would encourage you to see the rest of the presentation, namely, but not only, the benchmarking exercise, which is a very rich one. And I tell you that it costed a lot of time, but it's very interesting to see what the others are doing and what we can learn from what the others are doing, namely in terms of website and social media. I would say that some organizations communicate what they don't have. And what we are missing is to communicate properly what the wonderful things that we have. And that must be our effort, is take what we really have and bring it to the eyes of the others. That's the challenge that it's ahead of us and ahead of Rui and communications team. So ideas welcome, as Rui said. This is the start of an exciting journey. I think that we are already seeing some of the results, but there is a lot to be done. The resources are very scarce. And by the way, speaking about resources, I failed to present the rest of the team. We are also innovating and changing. So we have asked you sitting there as a member of the communications team. As Astu was also already doing a few things, but is now more officially part of the team. So there are changes. Jake is kindly working with us on a part-time basis. The rest of the time with IFAC has been very decisive, important to make advance a few things, namely in terms of social media and videos and etc. And Dave is unfortunately not with us for personal reasons, but of course has been contributing a lot. So thank you very much to the team for the big effort that this has already meant. Final word about the SMART. I truly see it as a more than only a communications instrument, as an instrument of consistency, cohesiveness, and something that we should drill down into the projects, into everything that we do, and maybe benchmark ourselves against these 5 lines of action, and see if what we are doing at all times is simplifying, contributing for adoption, for mobilization, is responsive to stakeholders' requests, and is targeted. These are lines of action which are more than communication. It's really like a map for us to ensure consistency in our action. And yes, I think that we are done for today. We've finished before time, which is amazing. Thank you very much for this great day. I think that if we were to go tomorrow, it would have been already worth to be here in this room discussing, because it was a wonderful conversation. Thank you so much, and see you tomorrow at 9, right?
Yes, 9 a.m. Is the start for tomorrow morning, so we will see you all bright and early. For the planning committee does have a meeting, which is a sort of debrief of the board discussion, and the planning committee is meeting in the green room. So if you could ask planning committee members to make your way to the green room. Luigi, I know it's kind of late, very late your time, so I think we will understand if you're not able to join us. We can always feed back to you sort of the direction forward after the conversation this evening. But I would leave it entirely up to you.
Thank you. See you tomorrow.